Welcome Warriors of the Living Lands. If you're looking for a build that lets you strike from the shadows and annihilate enemies with a single devastating attack, then you're in the right place. This is the Phantom Berserker, a stealthy, high damage assassin warrior build that turns you into a spectral executioner. Now let's dive in. The Phantom Berserker is all about sneaking up on your enemies, delivering an earth-shattering blow, and vanishing before they can react. We'll focus on stealth, critical damage, and two-handed weapon mastery. Before getting into the primary abilities and equipment for the build, we're going to talk about character creation and stats. These are the stats I recommend starting your character out with in the character creation. Might is the second most important stat both in the early and late game, and it is a primary source of how we get our damage. In combination with Perception, this is what allows us to one-shot our enemies. Constitution will not be used at all in this build. This build is not a tank build, it is a glass cannon one-shot build. Your primary survival will be through dodging and stealth. Dexterity is also not used at all in this build. This is a power attack based build where you one-shot your enemies with one or two swings rather than many swings. Perception isn't a super important stat early on, as our critical hits don't deal a ton of damage just yet. But later on in the game, this is what allows us to guarantee more criticals for big damage. Intellect is a somewhat important stat, as this allows us to cast the few abilities we do use, but early on, we don't really have enough ability usage to need it to be that high. Last but certainly not least, we have Resolve. I personally find this to be the single best stat in the entire game. As long as you have enough stamina to dodge, it's very hard to die. And not only that, but your stamina also increases your damage output because you have more stamina for more swings. If you're finding it difficult to dodge, then you can probably dump a few resolve points for Constitution instead. However, in an ideal world with this build, you are just not getting hit at all. The Phantom Berserker doesn't fight fair. It fights to end battles in a single brutal strike. Here's how we'll make that happen. With Shadowing Beyond, you can disappear at will, reposition, and deliver devastating sneak attacks. Whether you love stealth or just want to control the flow of combat, this ability is an absolute game changer. Shadowing Beyond is maybe the most powerful ability in the game. It lets you instantly vanish from sight, even in the middle of combat. Unlike traditional sneaking, this isn't about tiptoeing around, it's about resetting the fight on your terms. Enemies will lose track of you, giving you a chance to escape, revive teammates, reposition, or line up the perfect sneak attack. A couple of the most overpowered aspects of Shadowing Beyond is that this ability makes you invulnerable. If an enemy is swinging at you while you're activating this ability, they will not deal any damage to you. This helps a lot when you're in boss fights where they might deal big damage with a single swing. Additionally, you can use health potions and essence potions while invisible and you'll stay invisible. If you find yourself low on health and your teammates are down, just pop stealth, heal yourself, heal your teammates, and stab someone in the back, and the fight is immediately swung back into your favor. Barbaric Shout has our character letting out a thunderous roar that staggers enemies and gives us high stun damage. This ability is especially very good versus bosses to keep them stunned and deal high damage to them, especially when used in combination with the ability we get later, Flurry of Blows. Flurry of Blows allows us to move like the wind and rapidly strike our enemies. This is one of the reasons why we keep our dexterity at 0, because when we activate Flurry of Blows, we get all of that attack speed back for free. Flurry of Blows in combination with Barbaric Shout trivializes every single boss in the game. You attack so fast and build up so much stun that the bosses cannot move for the full 15 seconds. This also synergizes fantastically with critical hit, as we'll be hitting a critical with every other swing and we'll be swinging much faster with this ability. Another small bonus of this ability is that you can use it to traverse the map much faster. Just use this and some essence food and you'll be able to explore the map much faster. The last two abilities I would like to talk about are the passives Harvest Essence and Constant Recovery. Harvest Essence, in combination with our weapon of choice that we will get to later, basically means we will never run out of essence, allowing us to constantly spam Flurry of Blows and Shadowing Beyond. Constant Recovery has insane synergy with Shadowing Beyond. If you take a hit and then pop Shadowing Beyond, by the time you come back out of stealth, you will already be back up at full health without even needing to use a potion, allowing you to continue the fight much faster. The combat approach for this build is pretty simple. Strike first, strike fast, and strike hard. If you are able to sneak up on the enemies and land a sneak attack for free and then use Shadowing Beyond, giving you 2 free kills, the fight is pretty much already over. Shadowing Beyond is especially great because in this game, if there's a priest alive and he's not dead, you're not going to be killing anything. So prioritize Shadowing Beyond to go and assassinate that pesky priest, summoner, or wizard. After you get in the back line and assassinate a few of their high damage dealers and healers, the fight is already over because the frontliners don't really do a whole lot. Use power attacks over quick swings and you'll pretty much be able to one-shot most enemies in the game when you land a critical hit. If they aren't dead in one swing, it'll only take about 2 more. Versus bosses, I like to use both Barbaric Shout and Flurry of Blows and pretty much just permanently CC the boss until they're dead. One of the best combinations to use with this build is the companion Giata and her ability Acceleration. If you have her use Acceleration and then you use Shadowing Beyond, you're able to get 3 to 4 Shadowing Beyonds off within the first 25 seconds of the fight, making you invulnerable for that entire period and killing 4 enemies at your will. Equipment plays a huge role in making the Phantom Berserker truly terrifying. For the early game, I have exact locations and recommendations in my leveling guide. But for now, we're going to go over the final build. The weapon of choice is the Hell's Tongue. This is acquired about midway through the game. This is my favorite weapon I acquired over the course of the entire game. It deals great damage and has 2 very nice passives. The first of which is Soul Obliteration. Power attack kills restore 15% of your maximum essence. This is why we use power attacks to ensure that we never run out of essence. And then we can always use Shadowing Beyond and always use Flurry of Blows. The second passive is Emotional. This is actually super nice because in combination with Flurry of Blows, I end up freezing enemies very quick and very often. In your offhand, I would always recommend bringing along a Grimoire of Defense. There is absolutely no downside to switching to your offhand and using Arcane Veil for free. This will cost a little bit of essence, but getting a free 50% damage reduction is pretty good. Additionally, I use a pistol in case I want a ranged option for some reason. The offhand is really completely up to you and you can decide to use whatever you would like. The armor of choice is the Counselor's Garb, because as it turns out, having an extra 50% stealth attack damage on a stealth-based build is pretty good. Additionally, I think this is the tankiest light armor option available in the game, providing us with a decent extra amount of damage reduction. Small tangent, but I pretty much recommend always going with light armor or medium armor if you must in this game, because having more stamina and more essence is much more valuable than having a little extra amount of damage reduction. Stamina and essence can still provide you with defensive and offensive options, whereas extra damage reduction is just extra damage reduction. Additionally, there is another great choice in the armor slot, which is the Hellwalker's Vestments. This is for the true glass cannon enjoyers out there, but I found that getting one shot occasionally was more frustrating than it was worth. For gloves, we have the Trickster's Gloves. Not much to say here, just gives us a ton of extra critical damage. As someone that prefers dodging over parrying and blocking, these boots are a match made in heaven for me. This is one of my favorite equipment pieces in the entire game, and I foresee myself using these on quite a few builds. The way I see it, the more essence you have, the more powerful your character is, and the more fun you're going to have with casting spells. Which, at the end of the day, casting spells in this game is what makes combat fun. The trinket of choice is the Scout's Reach. This just gives us +3 perception, which gives us much higher critical hit chance. The Ring of Prosperity's Fortune is pretty interesting in that it increases your critical hit chance with how much money you have. The critical hit chance only caps out at 5%, but I find that to be much better than any of the other rings I found, for this build in particular. And for the final piece of equipment, we have the Ring of Pain amplification, which just gives us a lot more critical damage. This is what my final stat total looked like. Depending on the choices you make, your stats may come out a little bit differently, but you will want your stats somewhere in this ballpark. Prioritize Might, Perception, and Resolve. I choose not to max any of the stats out because once you get past 10 in any stat, there is huge diminishing returns. Additionally, there is no reason to go all the way to 15 because with food buffs, the food will do that for you. With food buffs, my Might, Perception, and Resolve are all pretty much maxed out. And there you have it, the Phantom Berserker build. Perfect for players who want to blend stealth and raw power. This build is all about tactical strikes, high risk, high reward gameplay, and utterly obliterating enemies before the fight even begins. As always, there is a Google Sheet in the description that will act as a full level-by-level guide to make your playthrough as easy as possible. If you enjoyed this build, drop a like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more Avowed builds. Let me know in the comments what kind of build are you running in Avowed, and thank you all very much for watching.